Hello, this is John Torpey. Today I'm going to talk about how corporate social responsibility performance affects the outcome of regulated electric utility rate case proceedings. This presentation will be looking at the industry background, problem summary, some theory, talk about our hypotheses, the methodology, and then finally we'll talk about the replication study that was looked at during this class and some course reflections. To begin with, we're looking at the electric utility industry and how its corporate social responsibility or CSR performance may influence the outcome of regulatory proceedings. The literature I reviewed for this study included concepts of strategy theory, systems theory, stakeholder theory, and a lot of literature on corporate social responsibility and stakeholder interaction and CSR and corporate financial performance. So the study I'm going to perform will use a quantitative correlation analysis looking at the results from regulatory rate cases, comparing that to stakeholder interaction measures. I'll be looking at corporate financial results and financial performance relative to CSR performance measures, and trying to determine if these CSR performance measures and stakeholder interaction measures are a good predictor of regulatory outcomes. And we're looking to see if this research could potentially guide company strategy in interacting with various stakeholder groups. A little bit on the background of the utility industry. Utility companies earn revenue by selling electric services to customers. The rates they can charge are regulated at the state level. If a utility wants a rate increase, it must go to the Utility Commission to request that increase during a contested hearing where stakeholders can intervene and ask the Commission to grant the utility less than what it's asking for. When I look at utility interaction with stakeholders, we've seen certain states introduce kind of mandated utility interaction processes for resource planning for the company to meet the customer's load, and also for energy efficiency planning as well. And the objective that the states have in putting these processes together is to make sure that customers and utility companies interact and reduce conflict and come to resolution on issues that would be beneficial to both of them. Also, we're seeing investors relying more on corporate social responsibility and sustainability performance measures in making their stock recommendations. And we are seeing many utilities now in this regard making announcements that they'll be reducing their greenhouse gas emissions over the next 5 to 20 years. So for the problem statement is really how has the utility stakeholder interaction process shown any value? And again, we'll be looking at various stakeholder groups and the impact interaction with the company has on subsequent regulatory outcomes. Be looking at measures of CSR performance and seeing if that affects company financial performance, and really if poor performance in CSR has a negative effect on regulatory performance as well. And again, we're looking at trying to find some benefit here for the utility managers in terms of dealing with stakeholders and also initiating CSR activities. There's a number of research papers that address these issues, some of which look at CSR initiatives and financial performance, others that look at interaction with the companies and their stakeholders improving performance as well, and specifically this research looking at or requesting that future research be looking at direct measures of specific company activities and how that affects their financial results. The hypotheses are basically the null hypotheses that I'd be examining here are that whether it's stakeholder interaction or CSR performance, the null hypotheses is they have no relation to rate case outcomes or financial performance, and the alternative hypotheses are that they do. Some of the variables I'll be examining are for the independent variables, environmental performance, again, environmental or social performance scores, from various third-party agencies or entities that measure that, whether there's state stakeholder meeting requirements or interaction requirements, and energy efficiency performance as well, and whether there's interaction on energy efficiency requirements at the various states. The dependent variables, again, there's financial metrics that I'll be looking at, and also rate case outcome metrics that I can look at as well. There are quite a few control variables that can be may influence various outcomes, company size, politics of the state, percent of industrial load, to name a few. So those would have to be controlled. The population that I'm considering is U.S. investor-owned electric utility companies. The data, I have data going back to 2011 from S&P Market Intelligence showing various rate case outcomes. The sample is shown below. Also, I have utility characteristics from the U.S. Energy Information Agency, which basically shows percent of load for industrial customers, commercial customers, has energy efficiency metrics as well. Stakeholder interaction is basically looking at each state utility commission's website and determining what their interaction requirements are. And financial stats are available from a large number of sources. The analysis, initially for this course, I did some high-level analysis here. I looked at some t-tests to see if there's a relationship between individual variables and rate performance and MSCI or environmental measures and financial performance. Did some chi-square testing for some categorical variables that I have in my paper, and but ultimately for this data, I'll be looking at doing some principal component analysis and some factor analysis to get the number of variables down to a manageable level. Some early screening results on the left, I looked at whether or not there was a public interaction process for putting together integrated resource plans at the state level. So for states that had public interaction processes, their utility rate requests were reduced by 29% from what the utility asked for. Where there was no interaction or no stakeholder interaction process, the utility request was reduced by 54%. So from a standpoint of, is this variable at some value, I think it's something I can look at further, as there is a significant difference between those two categories of states. On the right, I looked at 5-year average return for companies that had environmental ratings of either average or laggards. And unfortunately here, there was really no discernible difference between laggard companies and average companies based on their environmental rating. So this may not be as critical an area to look at, although this is very early in the analysis process, and we'll have to do quite a bit more digging to do this. With the replication study, I looked at a study by Lynn on how nurses interact with patients from different cultures, which really has, from a subject matter perspective, doesn't correlate to what I'm doing, but the author did use techniques that may be useful in my study, structured equipment modeling, and other metrics that were interesting to see how they were applied, and certainly something that I would consider. Also, just seeing how data was screened and validated was also very beneficial in terms of how that would be applied to my study. And finally, for the course reflection, this was a somewhat challenging course in that there were for the practice exercises, there really were no cookie cutter answers. All the methodologies had to be researched. I spent a lot of time looking at SAS videos online, try to figure out what's going on. I did learn there's a lot of resources out there to assist in doing these analyses, that there's a lot of tests that we need to run to ensure the integrity of the data and ensure the integrity of the analytics we perform, and that it really takes some time to playing around with these programs in SAS to master them and make sure your data is in the right format and that we're clicking all the right buttons to get the program to run and produce the results we want to see. What would I do differently? I probably would have spent some more time on the basics of SAS prior to taking this class. I had my previous statistics class, we used SPSS, so I did spend a little bit of time having to learn SAS to do some of the homework assignments here. And also for the course project, I probably would have, I think it was good to use our data. For myself, it would have been better if I spoke with the instructor early on in the course to get an idea of what it is the test I should be running, the type of data I should be collecting. I did that kind of late in the process, but it was a very beneficial conversation. Some references, and if you have any questions, here's my email. Thank you very much.